190 million followers. I'm still pretty famous.
The Boys Season 3, Episode 7 ending, explained in detail. Season 3 has just been getting dark from episode to episode, and the latest one, titled Here Comes a Candle to Light You in Bed, after Chapter 10, Part 4 of The Boys, managed to live up to the hype and then some. Eric Kripke and co have been notoriously good at pulling off plot twists that leave your mind blown to bits, but what they managed to accomplish in this season, even we didn't see coming. We get the fallout to Herogasm, finally seeing what happened to Queen Maiev, continue to follow Butcher and Soldier Boy's path of destruction, and find out a rather disturbing revelation about Homelander that can change the landscape of the entire series. But how exactly do some of these things fit into the story? Where do the boys go from there? And how exactly will Homelander deal with this terrifying new life update that he has gotten? We'll break down all of that and more in this video. This is The Boys Season 3 Episode 7 ending, explained in detail. Oh, and before we forget, this is your spoiler warning, because there are going to be a bunch of those. And before we get into the video, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Now, let's get right into it.
Oh my God.
We'll start with a brief overview of Season 3, Episode 7. If we had to put a theme to this episode, it would have to be Revelations. You know how Assassin's Creed Revelations kind of pulls together all the strings for Ezio's trilogy and ties it into the first game in a neat little package? Well, this episode is that, and then like 6 more revelations on top of that. No memory keys required. Kimiko reveals her true desires, Soldier Boy reveals his true colors, Mother's Milk reveals his rage straight to Todd's Homelander-loving bespectacled face, and Annie drops the mother of all reveals about V24 and its effects. Speaking of Homelander, he finally gets the reveal behind his backstory, and speaking of backstories, we finally get the full reveal of Butcher's dark origins, and possibly a hint at Huey's dark future too. The storyline progression of the show was so intense that the reveal of A-Train and Queen Maiev's survival fell oddly flat, and those were some of the most pressing questions heading into Episode 7. Butcher's mission for vengeance has led him to make a compromise that he might be starting to hate by the second, and Soldier Boy's mission for vengeance has just had a rather explosive subplot added to it that changes the entire power dynamic of the show. But we've used Revelation as a hook enough already. Let's dive into where each character's fate stands at the end of this episode.
What father wouldn't want that for his son?
Soldier Boy's Homeland's daddy, literally. Comic book fans might remember the dynamic being clearly reversed and a lot more sexual in nature, but the obvious underlying joke here does not take away from the impact of this revelation. Ever since Soldier Boy was introduced to the story, we noticed something about his character that was eerily similar to Homelander's. It was the fact that they were literally one and the same. Sure, Soldier Boy has way more of an overt racism grandpa vibe to him, whereas Homelander simply has a severe god complex with a dissociative identity disorder. Let that sink in for a minute. But in the short time we've known them, they've surprisingly shared the same ultimate desire: family. Homelander might be a lot of crappy things in real life, but his genuine desire for family is probably his only sympathetic and somewhat redeeming quality. He opines on multiple occasions to Maiev that he always wanted to be with her because ultimately he wanted to start a family with her, something he openly acknowledged in this episode when he visited her in her cell at Vout Tower. You know, the first thing that Soldier Boy complains about after killing Crimson Countess, besides the sauce of course, that's right, starting a family. Despite being from completely different timelines and having completely different ideas of even the notion of being the strongest, when it comes to the topic of family, Soldier Boy and Homelander are identical. They both misconstrued their partner's acts of affection as genuine love, they both wanted to marry them and have kids with them, and they both wanted boys from their baby mamas. In hindsight, that was our first hint that Soldier Boy was, in fact, the father of Homelander in Amazon's The Boys. In the comics, things are a little different than they are in Eric Kripke's adaptation. There, most Supes were injected with Compound V in the womb, and they gain their specific traits after their physical bodies manifest fully, but that is not the case for a few members of the Seven. The big three especially have been specifically singled out as test tube babies, whereas in the show only Homelander was a product of immaculate conception. But here's the interesting part about that. In the comics, it was Stormfront's DNA that was used as a base for Homelander. Being the first official Supe in existence, when Stormfront was brought to the US by Jonah Vogelbaum, who is the creator of Compound V in the comics, he also became Subject Zero for Vough's Supe program. That ultimately led to the creation of Homelander, his clone Black Noir, and possibly Queen Maiev as well, given that all three share exactly the same facial characteristics, blonde hair and blue eyes. In other words, Adolf Hitler's dream race known as the Aryan. Now, it's still possible that Stormfront is Homelander's mother in this series because, judging by the way Soulja Boy called her a firecracker and named her co-creator of the Herogasm, it's clear that they shared a somewhat special relationship. And if you think about it, how do you make a Supe that is stronger than your current strongest man alive? You combine his DNA with your original template, and you see what happens, which we're assuming is the route that Dr. Vogelbaum took in the series, though that is probably not going to be clear until much later. If this is true, however, it would both explain and creepily play into Homelander's relationship with Stormfront because, as we all know, Homie's got serious mommy issues. But that's not what we're going to discuss here. Actually, because his life-shattering revelation is something he gets at the end of the episode, let's see how Homie got there in the first place.
Turns out, Vogelbaum made a kid. Born spring, 1981.
Homelander's bad day gets worse and ends with the biggest crisis of faith of his life. Season 3 has been all about Homelander attempting to keep his sanity together by a thread that is about to tear itself apart any second now. He's in crisis management mode, and sadly for everyone who's allied with him, that means he is panicking the F out, and you do not want to provoke a panicked Homelander, as Victoria Newman finds out in this episode. Homie is struggling with the prospect of Soulja Boy getting him, to say the least. The Herogasm episode ended with him sporting a massive bruise, but when this episode opens up, it's gone. Well, Homelander covered it up with concealer, but you can see that this simple act shows how just on edge he is about his image and reputation. And this theme of Homelander being more concerned about his own image than anything else is nowhere more prevalent than when he gives a speech at Dakota Bob's presidential rally and obstinately breaks down into a rant about Starlight and how she is nothing but a liar and a woman scorned who is out to take revenge on Homelander because he spurned her affections. Early in the episode, we see Ashley with Cameron Coleman on VNN branding Starlight a traitor to America, exposing her links to Kimiko, and steering the PR ship firmly in the direction that Homelander wants it to sail towards. It's understandable then that Dakota Bob gets more than a little nervous when Homelander goes off on his rant, and for a moment it looks like we're going to get that actual version of that Homelander vision from season 2 when Homie starts hallucinating Soulja Boy in the crowd and lights up his laser eyes for a split second before realizing he's just being paranoid. He abruptly ends the speech and goes off to a barn to milk a cow, literally, and guzzle down his favorite beverage to calm himself. Victoria Newman catches him in the act and rightfully calls him out for losing his grip. She tells him all she wants is a transactional relationship with him, clearly indicating that she wants out of her deal with Homie as quick as possible, while pointing out to him that she is the only ally he has and the only person who will tell him how it is. And the way it's looking, if Homelander keeps going off on rants like this, it won't be long before public opinion turns against him, which is literally the only thing he has going for him. But then, even that is taken away from him when Starlight breaks out Vout to steal some Compound V for Kimiko. More on that later. And Homelander confronts her. Homie being Homie, he naturally assumes that his intimidation tactics will work on Annie, and he even doubles down on the threat he made to Huey's life after killing Supersonic, basically confirming the kill, in the hope that that would be enough to get her to do his bidding. But Homelander's constant need to keep his image protected and his ego satisfied finally pulls a fast one on him when Annie reveals that she had been live streaming their conversation to her 190 million followers.
90 million followers. I'm still pretty famous.
He immediately drops the intimidating tactics and puts on his crazy smile mask, cheerfully greeting Starlight's followers and trying to cover it up by saying they're just practicing lines, but by that time Annie leaves the building. They both know that this is the beginning of the end of his public image. Homelander had underestimated her wits and paid the price for it. At the end of the episode, we see that he is at his own wits' end, yelling at Ashley to pull out her spin doctor tricks and spin the story to her favor no matter the cost. But that's when we see two things that we're going to explore more in detail in another video. The first is a yellow piece of paper. Remember when we said that Vicky wanted to have a strictly transactional relationship with Homelander? Well, she told him that she needed something from him, and in exchange, she could help him find what she's looking for all season. The penultimate scene of the episode shows us that the piece of paper has an address on it, which can only mean one thing. Vicky just gave Homelander Ryan's address. Another reason we believe this to be the case is because Ryan was name dropped in this episode for the first time since Butcher split with Mallory, which could be one of the many seeds that Eric Kripke famously likes to plant in his stories. We'll have to wait and see where that one goes, and the second thing that happened to him is something we've already addressed, but we'll get into it from Homelander's perspective this time around. Because Soldier Boy is not someone we've seen too much of, whereas by this point we practically know everything about Homelander, and that is precisely why we can begrudgingly say that we understand why he does what he does. That mirror scene made it very clear that at his core, Homie just wanted to be loved like any other human being. He wanted a mommy and a daddy and a boo-hoo-hoo. Well, he's had at least a couple mommies by this point and made one himself. But as the adage goes, there's nothing like the relationship between a son and his father. We've seen Homelander take on the latter role, well, try to with Ryan already. The weird thing is, he somehow was okay at doing it. He acknowledged Ryan's pains, his emotions, and he genuinely cared for him when he freaked out at Planet Vo. Of course, that doesn't change the fact that what he truly values is power over everything else, but with Ryan, we saw Homelander at his most human. Now, the roles are reversed, because Homelander is a son in this brand new show-exclusive dynamic between him and Soldier Boy, and what's more is Homelander knows it as well. You can see it clearly on his face. When Soldier Boy calls him and tells him he wants to talk, Homie is very agitated and defensive, but as he continues to talk, Homie falls dead silent. Soldier Boy tells him about a genetic experiment Dr. Vogelbaum called him in for in 1980 and makes a filthy reference to Pomeranians in the process. He tells him he had to leave a semen sample for Vogelbaum, and he tells him that Vogelbaum made a kid with it. Homelander is still hesitant to accept the implication, but when Soldier Boy says the kid was born in spring 1981, the revelation hits him like a lightning bolt. We've sung Anthony Starr's praise a lot on this channel, but his sheer range of expression itself is Emmy-worthy. He went from anger to denial to disbelief to disconnection in less than 5 minutes, and the thing is, that is probably exactly how Homelander feels. His entire arc up to this moment has been motivated by the fact that he doesn't know the love of a parent, and that void has left him so lonely that it can only be filled with egoism and approval ratings. Now that he knows the identity of one of his parents, and not only that, but has actual proof that he exists, it is going to be very hard to predict what he does next. But what we can guarantee is that it's bound to be diabolical, to say the very least.
You stay still,
Butcher sees Lenny and Huey and wants to save him, but will he be the one to do it? Episode 7's emotional anchor was the usually stoic Billy Butcher himself, and we got to witness firsthand what it was like growing up in the Butcher household. Suffice it to say, it was rough going at the very least. We'd already heard exactly how terrible Butcher's dad was back in the day, from his own mouth no less. In Season 2, Episode 7, we met Sam Butcher, Billy's father and domestic violence perpetrator extraordinaire. In a short scene between two terrific Lord of Rings alumni, John Noble and Carl Urban, we find out why Butcher is the way he is. Turns out Sam used to beat his children to within an inch of their lives when they were growing up as his way to toughen them up. Naturally, both his sons resented him, and Billy even left his home to join the SAS, thereby starting his career in the field. The only reason he was even meeting his father in the first place was because his mom tricked him into it. He didn't really give 2 cents about his dad's cancer. But this was the first time that we heard Lenny's name mentioned properly within context, and we realized that Butch's younger brother had committed suicide because he couldn't take their father's abuse anymore. Sam lays the blame squarely on Lenny's shoulder in that episode. He tells Billy that he loved Lenny, but Lenny couldn't hack it, and it only got him killed. In a sick, twisted way, he shows Billy respect for turning out to be the toughest bastard he knows, because in his head it proves that he was right. It was survival of the fittest, and only the strongest could have survived the hell he put them through. But we don't find out anything more about that, really. That is, until this episode dropped. After blowing up the TNT twins and about a dozen other Supes in Vermont, the only people left on Soldier Boy's kill list are Mindstorm and Black Noir. We'll get to the latter in a bit, but Soldier Boy does manage to track down Mindstorm with the help of Butcher and Huey especially. In the fight that ensues, Mindstorm manages to put Butcher in an endless cycle of nightmares, which reveals to us that all of Butcher's nightmares are about Lenny. Even though he told his dad that he was the reason Lenny died, deep down Butcher blames himself, which is proven by the monologue dream Lenny gives him towards the end of his hallucinations. And what makes it even more tragic, and a shade scarier as well, is the fact that Butcher constantly keeps shifting between picturing Lenny and Huey, revealing that he does in fact think of Huey as his little brother. But even that comes with a rather dangerous string attached to it. See, Huey's theme of this episode was getting his rose-tinted glasses knocked off his face, literally twice, by Soldier Boy himself. The episode begins with Huey and the Legend talking about Soldier Boy, and the former VP of Hero Management reveals to Huey that Soldier Boy never showed up for action at Normandy like he claimed to Huey a couple episodes earlier. He did show up for the photo op and apparently was also involved in Kennedy's assassination, which really shows you that Soldier Boy isn't all that different from Homelander after all. And it also shows Huey the same thing, but what confirms it is the fact that Soldier Boy is willing to let Butcher die to complete the mission. Huey stands up to him and reveals that he knows that he's been feeding him a bunch of BS so far and gets slapped in the face for it, but he continues to press through, and with Soldier Boy tracks down Mindstorm to a shack. The pair enter, and as soon as Soldier Boy discovers Mindstorm's location, Huey teleports him out of that place and brings him to wake up Butcher. Mindstorm tells him that Butcher is not a good person, but Huey calls him family and begs him to wake Butcher up. Billy gets up just as Lenny tells him that he will end up getting Huey killed too, just because it's in his nature, and shoots himself in the face. The last time we see Huey and Billy, they're at the Legend's place with Soldier Boy. While he's having a clandestine chat with his baby boy upstairs, Butcher gets a call that is literally life or death for him and Huey, but chooses not to divulge that info to him, instead telling him that they need to get back to the office instead, which can potentially lead to both their deaths, because...
Oh my god, you shouldn't even be on your feet. Come on. Yeah, we're just gonna go lie down for a minute.
Frenchie, Kimiko, and MM turn on Butcher and they are joined by Starlight. I mean, this one was a no-brainer for MM, really, considering the fact that Butcher drugged him after letting Soldier Boy loose and even prevented him from getting his revenge at Herogasm. But Frenchie and Kimiko are the ones who reveal just how far he is willing to go in his pursuit of revenge, because if we picked up on the dialogue correctly, then Butcher sold out Nina, Frenchie and Kimiko, to little Nina after their trip to Russia, and we're just gonna let you unpack that for as long as you want to. After patching up Kimiko and Sherry at the Flatiron building in the last episode, Frenchie comes to MM's home looking for help for Kimiko and looking to help him get back at both Soldier Boy and Butcher. The pair double down on the tapes they got from that Russian military facility and discover that things like halothane won't work on Soldier Boy because he is quite literally built different. But the Russians do manage to keep him under for 40 years, and Frenchie is able to deduce that they did it with the help of Novichok, the same Russian nerve agent that was in the news a few years ago for having killed a former KGB agent in the UK. Turns out Novichok's nervous system shutting effects are a quick nap for Soldier Boy, and it might also work against Homelander if push comes to shove, but they have to figure out how to get it. Frenchie jokes that they could take another trip to Russia, but eagle-eyed viewers will remember that little Nina didn't die, she just ran away from the warehouse where she had Frenchie, MM, and Kimiko locked up. So it is possible that Nina might come into play once again. It is also possible that Love Sausage could get involved somehow, given that he is clearly meant to be vast from the comics, and if you've read them, you'd know that the TV show Love Sausage is far less important to the story than his comic book character counterpart so far. Or they could just get another Supe to do the job for them, because that was Kimiko's arc for this episode. So far, we see her being afraid of her powers and hating having gotten them in the first place. When the boys go to visit Mallory, she shares a generally sad moment with Ryan when they both confirm that they hate their powers. Kimiko luckily is freed from her curse in episode 4 when Soldier Boy fried the Compound V from her system and left her powerless. But episode 6 made her realize that without her powers, she can't protect the people she loves. She accepts that the V doesn't make her a monster. In fact, it doesn't affect much of anything. What she chooses to do with it that matters. And she also reveals that she has a familial love for Frenchie and she wants to protect him no matter what happens. And so she requests Annie to break into Vault Tower and bring her Compound V, the permanent stuff. After seeing Kimiko's true heroic intent, Annie, who has been helping keep these three together all this while, decides to play her role in the story as well. Because Starlight is the true hero of the story, and as we've already noted, she is starting to come into her own in that role as well. She stood up to Homelander and duped him with her clever cell phone trick that created a PR crap storm for Ashley and the rest of his team. She brought Kimiko the V and will also probably soon realize where Maev is if she keeps going in and out like this. And at the end of the episode, she decided that she is going to save Huey whether he wants her to or not. And this is because she wants to be a hero, but because she realizes just how big of a monster Butcher is himself. See, when Annie breaks into Vought to get the V for Kimiko, she comes across some notes on V24 and realizes just how dangerous it is. Turns out V24 is so unstable that it creates lesions in your brains and turns it into effing Swiss cheese, in Starlight's words, not mine. She also discovers that 3 to 5 doses of the stuff will kill the person taking it outright, and we know that's true because earlier in the episode, Huey tells Butcher his brain is leaking when he gets a little something running out of his ear. And we've already told you how Kripke likes emphasizing certain things to set them up for future events. Starlight calls Billy and warns him because, of course, Huey isn't picking her calls. But Billy being Billy, he doesn't tell Huey, and that's something Frenchie and MM tell her too. So Annie's final scene of the episode sees her prepare to save Huey from Homelander, Soldier Boy, and Butcher because, after all, she is an effing superhero. Black Noir gears up to face his mistakes. So, this episode gives us the clearest glimpse into Black Noir's origin story and why he is the way he is in perhaps the most melancholy ways possible. Remember how Grace Mallory's recounting of the events of Nicaragua showed us Noir with all his face burnt and stuff, and we all just thought it was because of the rockets? Well, turns out it wasn't rocket fire that left him with a permanently scarred body and broken mind, it was Soldier Boy. In multiple beautiful sequences that blend together animation with live action footage, it is revealed that Gunpowder wasn't the only one subjected to Soldier Boy's hazing. In fact, he didn't even see the worst of it. That was reserved for Black Noir, who was still an exuberant African-American youth at the time who could actually speak. It's revealed that Soldier Boy once beat up Noir so bad that he came within minutes of dying. He did this because Noir almost landed the lead role in Beverly Hills Cops, and if he had, then that would mean that his popularity would rival Soldier Boy's. Noir held a burning grudge against him since then, and had apparently even approached Vought with the idea of disposing him, but never got the green light until Nicaragua incident. We find out that Stan Edgar gave him the green light only because Vogelbaum had managed to create Homelander, and that Soldier Boy was now an outdated model that they could finally dispose of without worrying about suffering too much of the financial setback. Noir and Payback square up to him and start fighting him when the Russians attack the base after they knocked out Gunpowder, but it becomes very clear that they are no match for Soldier Boy. In a scene that invokes Black Noir's comic book death, Soldier Boy bludgeons him and burns his face off by thrusting him into a burning hood of a Jeep. He then smashes him over the head so hard that a chunk of his brain flies right out of it, from the very same spot that Billy Butcher gets him pound of flesh from in issue 65 of The Boys. His sequences of self-reflection come to an end when his imaginary friends, aka Buster Beaver and his pizza pals, encourage him to face his destiny and take Soldier Boy head on. The last shot we see of Black Noir is him obstinately making up his mind to take out his former team member, or die trying. I mean, at least that's what I got from his silent stares and heavy breathing. It will be interesting to see where he goes from here, now that Soldier Boy and Homelander have a connection to each other that goes beyond his best friendship with Noir. It could be that Homie himself might kill Noir if he finds out that he kept him from meeting Daddy Dearest for 40 years, but that remains to be seen.
Anyway, I gotta bounce. But the A-Train's back, baby! Right? That's your...
Queen Maev and A-Train are alive, and neither of them are happy about it. The biggest question on everyone's minds when Herogasm came to an end was, where's Queen Maev? Is she dead? Is she actually in rehab? Turns out she is in Homelander's old cell, where he grew up to become the world's strongest hero. Homelander's first appearance in this episode is when he comes to visit Maev, but she immediately rebuffs his macho act by drawing attention to his bruise and the fact that he was scared out of his mind. Homelander changes the topic to the relationship, as he often does, and brings up the fact that he always wanted to have a child with her. He emphasizes how their child would have been perfect, twice as strong as Ryan, and this leads Maev to think he means to give her the same fate he gave to Ryan's mother. But Homelander's plans for her are somehow even worse than that. Maev asks him why he is letting her live when she is clearly a threat to him, when Homelander responds by saying he isn't letting her live, he's keeping her alive. He has a plan, you see. Homelander wants to harvest Maev's eggs and preserve them so that he can use them to birth a child if she were to die, which, let's be honest, is what he wants to do to her. It's an unsettling scene, sold even more by the fact that Homelander is literally acting like a lunatic from outer space here, with what all in his talk about harvesting eggs from her like they're an alien or something. But Maev stays defiant in the face of death and tells him this is one of her top 3 days in life because she got to see him scared. It will be interesting to see how they approach the storyline now that Soldier Boy is involved in the picture, but one thing is clear, though Maiev is alive, her life is on the clock, and that clock operates on Homelander's whims. And it looks like being grateful for life is a concept this episode has something against, because it's revealed that A-Train survived this run of redemption, but the cost of that was something his soul refuses to bear. Turns out Vought found A-Train right after the events of the Herogasm and was able to get him a super-abled heart from one of the deceased Supes that effectively took away all of his heart problems. A-Train could literally return to training the next day and run without any repercussions, but the heart that Vought gave him was Blue Hawk's, which made him go into despair. Blue Hawk was the reason his brother was paralyzed. He was the reason A-Train turned over a new leaf. A-Train probably wanted to die after killing him as his last act of self-redemption, but was now being forced to be grateful to him for saving his life. But what gave us hope was the fact that A-Train refused to play ball with Ashley like he used to. Sure, he agreed to talk shit about Starlight rather quickly, but they have history. What really caught our eye was his reaction to the movie Vought was apparently planning to make on his life. The moment Ashley said they were looking to bring in Tom Hanks to play his coach's role, A-Train snaps back into reality and says that his brother was his coach and that he didn't want to do the film. Ashley leaves the room after hysterically yelling out his catchphrase, but we can see that A-Train is pretty much done with Vought. We wouldn't be surprised if he turned against them in the next episode. What did surprise us was the deep, or rather, his side of spicing up a relationship.
Babe, this is Ambrosia's. She's...
Deep might be in deep trouble. So, at Herogasm, Eric Kripke brought his My Octopus teacher full circle when he made the Deep engage in intimate acts with an actual octopus. And then, as if to emphasize just how much of a bad idea that was, not just for his mission but his life in general, he ends up introducing the same octopus to his wife and then proposes an interspecies three-way between them. Naturally, Cassandra freaks out and leaves him because, well, he asked her to sleep with a cephalopod. But this breakup might be more trouble for Deep's genius intellect than he's thinking right now, because Cassandra was the brains of the operation between the two of them. Like it or not, it was because of her that Deep was able to stay reinstated for more than a day. She gave him the payback theory, she forced him to eat Timothy, and she helped him with every speech and appearance. Now, that second one is inhumane, yes, but not as inhumane as what Homelander would have done to them had he not eaten the octopus. So, watching Deep's deep affection for marine life and a complete lack of understanding of how the world works finally implode in his face would be a good measure of comeuppance for him. Heck, Cassandra might even go back to the Church of the Collective and tell the whole world that the Deep is more interested in sinning with eight-legged sea animals than an actual human girl. That would undo all of the careful image building they've done together for the past couple of years, but Deep being Deep cares for none of it. We don't know exactly what will happen now that he's by himself, but what we do know is that it cannot be anything that's good for him. We just hope that Homelander doesn't fry him up alongside his new girlfriend. We like Chase Crawford's boyish charm mixed with the hedonistic innocence and dash of stupidity. Losing that now would ruin the show for us. Marvelous verdict. We were convinced that Herogasm would be the peak of The Boys as an artistic creation, but episode 7 took that standard and left it in the dust by a mile. The amount of story progression that Eric Kripke and co. managed to stuff into an hour is sheer insanity, and yet it all played together seamlessly. Homelander ends this episode more undecided than ever in his entire existence, which is unfamiliar territory for him. The boys are effectively done, with Frenchie, Kimiko, and MM openly planning to go against Butcher and Soldier Boy. Starlight continues to embrace her destiny as a superhero, while Huey continues to descend into the fabricated state of ecstasy that an addict's favorite drug keeps them in. And Butcher continues to prove that no matter how hard he might try, he is his father at the end of the day. And worse, he's an even bigger monster than him because he has to put the life of a complete stranger at risk by not telling Huey about the V-24. Yes, you might argue that Huey and Butcher are practically family after all they've gone through together, but they've really only known each other for 3 to 4 years, even with the context of in-universe continuity. That is an unhealthy relationship just waiting to explode, and explode it might. When they get back to the Flatiron and greeted by disgruntled former teammates to say the least. Oops, shouldn't have said that. I was keeping that for our season 3 finale predictions and theories video, but, well, needless to say, what happens next will leave us with our jaws in our hands, and we cannot wait for it. And that'll be it for this video. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks for watching, you guys.
The fuck?